Hello, fellow Earthlings. This is Earthling 6455463 And no, robots are not going to be taking your jobs necessarily anytime soon. It's a lot of hype. And I'll get into that in a second. As usual, if you just like any of the things that you've seen before, maybe you've seen another video of mine or listened to it, could you please hit that like button? If you don't like it, maybe you could hit that dislike button or just, comment, subscribe, any of that stuff that you want to do. Yeah, and I am Earthling, yada, yada, yada. I've traveled a bit. I have a couple degrees. I have reshaped my body, and yeah, that's it for me. So, a couple of years ago, I remember I was sitting on top of the hype curve with respect to robots and automation taking away people's jobs, and I saw a lot of these articles that were going around in the media, and I completely bought it. Now, I've been around a number of different hype curves, items or concepts, ideas that were just hyped up as the next big thing. They're going to change the world. I remember XML was supposed to change the world. I think telemedicine was supposed to change the world. That was going to happen. You're going to be able to see a doctor over video. I'm at a loss for a couple other things. Oh, was that it? The thing that was the scooter that everybody was supposed to be using, and we wouldn't walk anymore. And there's a number of different things out there that just follow the typical hype curve. Now, what's the hype curve? The hype curve is, I think it's let's say a diagram or a graphic that was produced to show that new ideas and concepts ultimately never achieve the extent that we think that they are going to change the world. They never really get to that extent. But just like a stock, just like many other things in life, people just get more and more excited about what's supposed to happen using this technology, using this new type of science, this new idea. And once people start seeing that it's not happening, there is something called, I think it's the trough of despair or something like that. And then there is the something along the lines of accepting what it is this new technology actually can provide realistically. So yeah, there is that. That's one reason why robots and automation are not necessarily going to take over your job. Because and in this instance, I have to explain, I suppose, why it is that is not going to happen. Well, one aspect of it is that the technology just isn't good enough. It just is not good enough in many instances yet to be relied on the way that you can rely on a human. It could be that in many instances it's better than a human, but on average, we have to believe as individuals that it is. And once we find a part of the process where it's not as good, we a lot of times might decide to throw the whole baby out with the bathwater kind of thing. An example might be Google Translate. Now, Google Translate is great, but we can see that when you use it extensively for any kind of like a paragraph or a page of information, stuff starts to get confusing probably after the first line, and you just can't rely on it to give you something that is understandable from beginning to end. A human being, you can ask them 3 or 4 different ways. Google Translate just gives you, hey, this is what I got. You can always ask, like I said, a human being in a different way, what exactly do you mean by that? There's nothing like that with Google Translate or with any of these other options that you have. It just gives you what it gives you, And there's no like, well, it could also mean this kind of thing. Another reason is that depending on how strong your group is, you just don't have to let the technology be used. You can find ways to stymie the expansion and the use of the technology. So, for example, with respect to diagnoses of disease, with respect to the law, something like LegalZoom, for example, where you can use, I don't know if LegalZoom is exactly software, but with respect to cases, AI was supposed to be able to help us eventually be able to get, maybe if not legal advice, at least help with respect to that. And I might be blind, maybe I'm not seeing it yet, but 3 to 5 years ago, I remember posting this article about in 3 to 5 years, many of us are going to lose our jobs because this and that and the other and did it. And 3 to 5 years later, I don't know. Well, I don't know a lot of people to begin with, but I don't know anybody who has lost their job. I'm not seeing the headlines of these results that were predicted. Maybe it's more than 5 years ago. I thought, what was the point of even bothering to learn Korean? If in 3 to 5 years we're going to have like a universal translator and everything's going to be fine. Well, it's a long time later. It's like almost 6 years later. And that has not happened. You still are not going to have you're not going to have a human level translation from Google Translate. And telemedicine is not here. And, doctors and lawyers are probably not helping. They're not helping this thing that can take their jobs and reduce how much they're paid. They probably don't have a lot of incentive to let that happen, in the same way that they don't have a lot of incentive to have more medical schools and have more admittance to those medical schools. As a matter of fact, I would have mentioned this, that in Korea, that's what the government wanted to do. Government wanted more medical schools and more medical students to be admitted. And the medical staff of Korea, the doctors, went on strike until they broke the government and the government had to change course. So if they'll do that in South Korea, and given how big pharma has control and the Association of Doctors in America have control, they just don't have to allow that to happen. So there's the quality of the actual work that can be produced, and then there's the people who can just stand in the way of things being improved. Because you look around the world and there are many different countries doing many different things, and some of them are clearly better than others. But that doesn't mean that countries or people looking at another system are all going to agree that it is better. People are going to say, well, that's not better for me, so I'm not helping with that at all. The thing is that something could be better for everyone everywhere, but people don't like change. Even if that change is not really going to affect their lives negatively, they just don't want to change. I remember there was, they were talking about apples, right? And there's the red and delicious apple that is not very tasty. But there was a guy in one of these articles that I read who was talking about there are so many great tasting apples, I think these Fuji apples, and he was trying to get people to start selling these Fuji apples. And they didn't want to. They said, I've never lost a sale because of the taste of an apple. So I have no reason to start selling these better tasting apples because life is good. I don't want to change to do anything different. Or for example, Spanx. Spanx is a $1 billion company. And I would imagine that a lot of women all over America and all over the world are happy and really glad that Spanx exists. But when the founder of Spanx went to all these different mills to try to have them manufacture this thing for her, no, 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 no. And the one guy who came back to her and said yes, it was because his daughters had told him that you have to manufacture this thing because this is great. So if he didn't have daughters, that would be the end of that, right? The lady would not have been able to get her stuff produced. And it was a perfectly reasonable, helpful thing that can be, as a matter of fact, I argue with my friend about this because he's like, change will come, things will get better. And I'm like, no, they don't have to. I mean, there was always oil in the ground. There was always all of the resources that we need for this modern world to exist. They've been there. It's just the ideas and the desire, I suppose, to pursue new thought, new technology. Humans have been around for 200,000 years at least. And there is no compelling reason why all of the advances that we've had in the last 1,000 years, well, not even 1,000, let's say 500, let's say 200 years, that couldn't have happened 50,000 years after we evolved. So the idea that just because something is better and just because something might be useful, it doesn't mean that with respect to robots and robots coming on the scene, it's a choice. It's a choice that many of us can stymie. And yeah, it doesn't seem too likely that any robots are going to take over your jobs anytime soon if you have any power. Because it is about politics, it's about laws, it's about technology, it's about people who don't want to change. There's no reason to think that anybody is going to, for example, they could start dispensing vaccines in, what do you call them? In one of these dispensal machines, like a soda dispenser or something. You could have a vaccine dispenser. Put your arm up to the thing and it just sticks you. That is entirely possible. Why is nobody doing that? Why is nobody working on that? Anyway, that's just my opinion. If you like it, hey, press like. If you don't like it, disagree, press dislike. You can also subscribe, share, comment, or any of that YouTube feedback stuff that people do. But please keep in mind, what kind of feedback would you like if this were your YouTube content? Have a good one. Peace.